There is a question I have started asking women when I first meet them. Not the usual one. Not what do you do or where are you from or how many children do you have? I ask them, what do you like? Not what do you like to do for your family? Not what do you like about your work? What do you personally, on a Tuesday afternoon with no one watching, actually like? And I want to tell you about a woman I will call Anne, because when I asked her that question at 63 years old, she went very quiet. She said, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. She was not being modest. She was not deflecting. She was telling me the truth. And the truth disturbed her, as it should, because Anne had been a conscious, capable, thoughtful person for 6 decades. She had raised 3 children. She had worked. She had managed a household and a marriage and a social life for 35 years. And somewhere inside all of that, she had lost the thread back to herself. I want to talk about that today, about what happens when a woman looks up from the life she has built and realizes she is not entirely sure who built it, about the identity that lives underneath the roles, and about what it takes in your 60s to finally go looking for it. The first thing I want to say is about how this happens, because it does not happen through carelessness. It does not happen through weakness. It happens through the precise, methodical way most women of Anne's generation were trained to live. When Anne was young, her identity was shaped almost entirely by relation. She was her parents' daughter. Then she was her husband's wife. Then she was her children's mother. Then she was her employer's employee. Each of these identities was real. Each of them mattered. Each of them asked something genuine of her. But none of them was her. The thing about relational identities is that they are very good at filling space. When you are always someone's something, someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's reliable one, you are never empty enough to notice that there is nothing underneath. The roles are loud. The roles keep you busy. The roles tell you who you are by telling you what is needed from you. And as long as something is being needed, you do not have to ask the harder question. Anne said, I was good at all of it. I genuinely was. I was a good mother, and I think I was a good wife, and I was certainly a good employee. And I think that is part of what made it so hard to see I was succeeding at the thing I had been asked to do. I just had no idea it was the only thing I had. She said, I thought I had a personality. I thought I had preferences and opinions and a sense of myself. And I do. But when the roles fell away, I discovered that almost all of my preferences had been built around other people's needs. I liked what I liked because it fit into the life we had. I believed what I believed because it was what the people around me believed. I organized my tastes around what was possible rather than what was true. And when those people were no longer asking anything of me, I didn't know what was left. There is nothing unusual about Anne's story. In fact, what I have found in the many conversations I have had with women in their 60s is that it is almost the default. Almost all of us, to varying degrees, have built our sense of self around what we do for others. The woman who defines herself by her children, even after those children are grown. The woman who has shaped her personality so completely around her husband's preferences that she cannot tell anymore where he ends and she begins. The woman who has been so busy being competent that she has never stopped to ask whether the life she is competently managing is actually the life she would have chosen. Anne was not an exception. She was simply willing to name it. The second thing I want to say is about why that vacancy is so disorienting. Anne's marriage ended when she was 61. Not dramatically, not with cruelty or betrayal. It ended the way many long marriages end, quietly, mutually, with the slow recognition that the two of them had been living in parallel for years rather than together. Their youngest child had moved out. The house felt very large. And one evening they sat across from each other at dinner, and both of them knew at the same moment that they had been holding on to something that had already finished. She said, "I thought I would feel something enormous when it ended. I thought I would grieve or rage or be frightened. And I did feel those things briefly. But what came after the brief things was something I had no name for. It was a silence, a very large, very empty silence." She said, "I kept waiting to discover who I was underneath the marriage and the mothering. I kept thinking there would be a self waiting for me on the other side of all that. And there were traces of one, there were fragments, but I had not tended them in so long that they were very faint. I had to put my ear quite close to hear them." What Anne was describing is something I have heard from many women in their 60s. The discovery that an identity built entirely on roles is not actually an identity at all. It is a performance, a very convincing, very demanding, very loving performance, but a performance nonetheless. And when the audience goes home, you are left standing on a stage with the lights still on, wondering what you are supposed to do now. Some women find another role quickly. They become the grandmother before they have had time to figure out who they are without the mother. They find a new partner before they have had time to live alone. They take on more work, more volunteering, more usefulness, because usefulness is a language they know, and the silence of not being needed is genuinely frightening when you have never practiced it. Anne said, "I understood the impulse. I felt it myself. Every instinct I had was telling me to find something to do, someone to help, some way to be needed again, because that is how I had always known I existed. I mattered because I was useful, and without the usefulness, I didn't quite know how to justify being here." That is a difficult sentence to say out loud, and she said it very quietly. But I think it is one of the most honest things I have heard a woman say about what it is to grow up female in the way she grew up. You learn that your worth is what you give. And when there is temporarily nothing to give, you feel like nothing. The third thing I want to say is about what Anne did with that vacancy, because this is the part I think matters most. She did not fill it quickly. That was the first and hardest decision. She gave herself 6 months. She was specific about the number in which she would not define herself by anyone else's needs. Not her children, not her arriving grandchild, not the community group that wanted her skills. She said, "I gave myself permission to be temporarily useless, and it was one of the hardest things I have ever done." What she discovered surprised her. She had always believed she was not creative. She had believed this for so long she had stopped questioning it. It turned out she had absorbed the belief from her husband, who genuinely was not creative and who had a particular way of closing off things he found impractical. Over 35 years, she had quietly agreed with his assessment of the world until she could no longer distinguish her own assessments from his. When she started drawing alone, quietly, with no one watching, she found that she was not only capable of it, but that it did something to her that nothing else quite did. It settled her. It gave her back to herself in a way that was very quiet and very complete. She also discovered that she did not like noise in the way she had always performed liking. She had spent decades at crowded parties and loud restaurants, telling herself and others that she was extroverted. She was not. She was a woman who had learned to perform extroversion because her husband's world demanded it. What she actually wanted was quiet. One person, a long conversation, a cup of tea at a small table with someone who was genuinely interested in what she thought. She had been getting the other thing for 35 years. She said, "I feel like I am meeting someone I should have been introduced to a long time ago. Someone who was always there but who kept getting pushed to the back of the room. And I find I like her. I find her quite interesting. I am angry in a small way that I did not get to spend more time with her earlier. But I am here now." I want to say something to you if you are listening and any of this is landing. The question I asked Anne, "What do you like?" is not small talk. It is one of the most important questions a person can ask themselves. And if the honest answer is, "I don't know," that is not a failure. That is a starting point. Most of us spend the first half of our lives becoming what is needed. We are shaped by the people who raise us, the people we love, the work we do, the roles we accept. That shaping is not wrong. That is how a life gets built. But somewhere in the middle, and certainly by the time we reach our 60s, the question shifts. The question becomes, is there something here that belongs specifically to me? Not to the marriage, not to the children, not to the organization, not to the role, to me. If you have never asked yourself that question, I would ask you to ask it now. And if the answer does not come quickly, sit with the silence. The silence is not empty. The silence is where the real answer lives. Anne is 63. She has a grandchild she adores. She has friends she loves. She draws on Tuesday afternoons in a room of her own, with the door closed, making things no one has asked her to make. She said, "I thought finding myself would feel like a grand arrival, like some enormous discovery, but it does not feel grand. It feels more like relief, like finally taking off a coat that has been too tight for years, like breathing slightly differently, like being for the first time in a very long time in the right room. That is what I want for you. Not a grand arrival, just that, the right room. Yourself in it. The door open only as wide as you choose." My name is Patricia Hayes. This is Patricia's Porch, where I believe the most honest conversations are the ones that actually change us. If something in this reached you today, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe below. I am here every week, and I would love to keep this conversation going. Thank you for sitting with me. I will see you next time.